a complete chartered bus carrying a set of NYSC members who had just finished their 3 weeks orientation camp exercise in a faraway village of the northern part of Nigeria, got involved in a heavy and terrible accident on their way back to their various homes just because of one silly adventurous mistake that turned into a severe disaster. The sun blazed scorchingly over the small, quiet village of Umuagu. It was a village where the modern world seemed to pause, leaving its inhabitants occupied in tradition and ancient beliefs. For centuries, the villagers had lived in reverent harmony with nature, worshiping their popular gods, the earth goddess, and fiercely guarding their sacred symbols. One such symbol was the agwo, the sacred snake believed to be the messenger of the gods and the protector of the land. But on this fateful day, a group of NYCC members arrived at the village for their mandatory one-year national service. They were full of laughter and mischief, eager to explore all that the village has to offer and blissfully ignorant of the invisible rules that governed the village. Among them was Ebuka, a tall and brash young man whose disdain for tradition was matched only by his hunger for adventure. The NYCC members settled into their corpor's lodge, a modest structure at the edge of the village. They were warmly welcomed by the village chief, Igwe Ikankwo. He was a lovable king whom the villagers loved. He spent some time with the corpers at their lodge, telling them tales of their culture. The corpers were intrigued and listened wholeheartedly. After telling them a series of village tales, he ended by giving them a stern warning before they could get too comfortable. "This is Umuagu," the old man said, his voice steady and grave. "Here, we respect the spirits of our land. Above all, you must never harm the Ekensi. It is not an ordinary snake. It is sacred. Killing it brings a curse upon the land in the killer." The group exchanged uneasy glances, but Ebuka smirked and whispered to his friend Chike, "It's just a snake. These villagers and their superstitions." Days turned into weeks, and the NYC members slowly adapted to life in Umuagu. They taught at the village school, attended local festivals, and even tried their hands at farming. But Ebuka, restless and perpetually seeking excitement, found the quiet life stifling. One humid afternoon, the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the dense forest that bordered the village. Ebuka had managed to convince Chike, Ifoma, and 2 other corpers, Ada and Tony, into exploring the forest with him. The villagers had warned them against venturing too far, but Ebuka's charisma and persistence were hard to resist. "Come on, it's just a forest. What's the worst that can happen?" he said, flashing his trademark grin. The group trudged to the underbrush, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and the sound of distant bird calls. Ifoma, ever cautious, voiced her concerns. "Ebuka, we've been walking for over an hour. Shouldn't we turn back?" "Relax," Ebuka replied, swatting at a mosquito. "We're not lost. Besides, you might find something interesting." Ifewama, who had been quiet for most of the journey, suddenly stopped and pointed. "What's that? Over there?" The group followed her gaze to a clearing up ahead. As they approached, the forest seemed to grow eerily silent, the usual buzz of insects and rustle of leaves fading into an unsettling stillness. Did you hear that?" Chike asked, his voice trembling. "Hear what?" Ebuka replied, though his wide eyes betrayed his own fear. It was sounded like... The group froze, straining their ears. The sound grew louder, a sinister serpentine hiss that seemed to come from all directions. Suddenly, Ifoma screamed. In the center of the clearing lay the Ekensi. The snake was enormous, its black scales shimmering like polished obsidian in the dappled sunlight. It was coiled lazily, its head resting on its body, eyes half closed as if in a trance. For a moment, no one moved. Ifoma gasped and stepped back. She shouted out loud, "Snake, snake, snake!" she screamed. "It's the sacred snake," Chike whispered. "We should leave." Ifoma clutched Chike's arm. "She's right, we've seen enough, let's go." Ebuka's eyes lit up with a mixture of fascination and defiance. "Sacred snake or not, it's still just a snake," he said, stepping closer. "Don't," Chike warned, grabbing his arm. "You heard what the Igwe said. This isn't something to mess with." Ebuka shook him off. You're all too superstitious. It's just a harmless animal. Watch this. His boldness and masculinity gave the other court members some level of confidence. But Ebuka's eyes gleamed with mischief. Sacred snake or not, it's still a snake. What's the worst that can happen? Don't, Chike cautioned. You heard the Igwe. This isn't Lagos, where you can do as you like. Ebuka ignored him, picking up a machete. With a swift, brutal strike, he brought it down on the snake's head and cut it off. The snake writhed violently before going still. A heavy silence fell over them, broken only by the distant rustle of leaves. Defoma's voice trembled. You shouldn't have done that, she yelled. Relax, Ebuka said, throwing the machete aside. He carried the snake and put it inside a dirty duffel bag and told them, it's just a snake. Let's go. You all are just too superstitious. This would make a delicious pepper soup for tonight, Ebuka said. When they got back to their lodge, Chike lit the fire while Ifoma went out to get some water. As Ebuka tore the big python snake wide open, it was indeed a huge barbecue feast for the corpus. They roasted the snake and made some tasty pepper soup out of it. Ebuka and Chike stepped it down with some bottles of beer, while Ifoma enjoyed hers with a bottle of Fanta. Days passed, and things began to change for the bad in the village. The stream dried up, and there was heavy drought in the village. Everyone became thirsty and kept running to the palace to fetch from the only functioning well in the village. When it was time for harvest, they got little or nothing to harvest. Some of the villagers gradually began starving to death. Questions were asked, and soon all the villagers began to seek for answers. One sunny afternoon, the village chief priest stormed the king's palace with the answers they had been asking for so many months. He told the king that the great NYSC is dead. A heavy shock hit the king and the elders like a wave of electricity with confusion. The king did not believe what his ears had just heard. He knew the consequences of NYSC being killed. The king was very angry. Quickly, the Igwe ordered the town crier to go around the village and to ask for all the villagers to assemble at his palace immediately. That evening, the sky darkened unnaturally early. The air grew heavy, and a strange, mournful wail echoed through the village. The villagers gathered at the Igwe's palace, their faces etched with fear. When the news of the snake's death reached them, there was an audible gasp. The NYSC is dead, a woman wailed. We are doomed. As she removed her wrapper out of pain and fear, she was Mama Ekene, the local food vendor that sells down the market road. She was an elderly woman in her late 60s. She had lost her only son to the famine and drought that the unfortunate calamity had brought, and this made her very bitter. Who did this? The Igwe demanded, his voice shaking with anger as he held his royal staff firmly, waiting to punish the perpetrators of the heinous traditional crime. No one answered, but the NYSC members' nervous glances gave them away. The villagers turned on them, their eyes burning with accusation. The suspicion grew louder as this drew the attention of almost all the villagers, but they were careful not to wrongfully accuse the court members. The Igwe was a no-nonsense man, and he would not tolerate any false accusations. When the corpers got back to their lodge, the corporal were all in soupores about the meeting with the king, but on the other hand, Chike, Ebuka, and Ifoma were restless and began making plans to run away from the village because they knew soon enough the villagers would come after them for their atrocities. The next day, the village chief priest carried out a cleansing sacrifice for all villagers to prevent them from the inimical misfortunes that would befall the village. The villagers all dressed in white clothes and lined up at the king's palace for the cleansing. Soon, the gods of the land revealed to the chief priest about the true disappearance of the NYSC. He quickly rushed to the palace to meet with the king. As soon as the Igwe spoke, the chief priest could not hold his patience. He quickly spoke out. It's the corpers that killed the NYSC. Your Majesty. The chief priest, visibly shaking, waited for the king to give his orders so he can punish them. But the king asked everyone to remain calm the next day. The corpers were summoned to the palace for questioning. The king asked all three of them, "Our gods has revealed to us that you killed the NYSC," his voice shaking and filled with anger. But the soft, apologetic tone of Ifeoma, the female NYSC member, calmed him. He then further told them, therefore, there are immediate sacrifices you all need to carry out. Otherwise, great calamities will befall not just you, but your families. The Igwe raised his hand for silence. You have brought a curse upon yourselves and this land. The spears will not rest until justice is served. The corporers knelt down, begging the Igwe, we are sorry, Your Majesty. Please intercede on our behalf. We thought it was just an ordinary snake. They could not deny the king's allegation, so they pleaded for mercy by saying, we did not know it was a sacred snake. Please have mercy on us, Your Majesty. But the chief priests insisted by telling them they are to perform the 3 rituals as follows. And he stated them as follows. You will walk down the village square every day naked for 7 days. Secondly, you shall not eat any food but only fruits for the next 30 Eka market days. And the last one he mentioned boldly and loudly, you shall give the Eka market day a befitting burial ceremony before the next Eka market day. This demand sounded like a dream to the corpers. It was like what they had seen in movies, but they are no choice but to obey the instructions of the village deity or bear the consequences of their actions. This demand sounded like a dream to the corpers. They wished there was another way. That evening, when they got back to their corpers' lodge, Ebuka exclaimed loudly, I can't do any of those diabolic sacrifices they're asking. I'm a Christian, and I won't indulge in any of such practices. The other court members were hesitant to say a word out of the fear and shock in them. Corporal Chike walked up to Corporal Ebuka and furiously hit me with a blow as he shouted, you caused all this. You should not have killed that snake. Now look at what you have gotten us all into. Ebuka replied him angry by saying, did you not eat the snake meat? You even said it was more delicious than any meat you have ever eaten. Get lost and don't disturb me again. As for me, I won't indulge in any God-forsaken ritual. On the other hand, Corporal Fioma stood still as if she were in a trance. Tears dropped down her cheeks as she said, this can't be happening. I can't believe this is actually happening. Fuma said it's just a coincidence, she insisted. There's no such thing as curses. The corpers ignored all the series of warnings from the king and the village chief priest. They reported to their various places of assignments. Where they were teaching in the village school, the villagers also became very uncomfortable having them in their community. But the corpers did not care at all. Some even mocked the village gods. Weeks turned into months, and the corpers' local government inspector announced to them that they would be going to spend time with their families for the Christmas break. There was a lot of joy and laughter filled in the air. Finally, they thought to themselves they would meet their families again. That was a laundry day for all the corp members. They washed the clothes and bags and prepared anxiously for the next day. Yeah. The next morning, the NYC members decided to leave the village. They couldn't bear the accusing stares of the villagers or the eerie atmosphere that had descended upon Umwagu. They boarded a rickety bus heading to the nearest town, hoping to leave their troubles behind. As they all boarded the bus and began their journey, Ifoma asked them to pray, but Ebuka only laughed out loud and said, I do not need to pray for God to protect me, and he made fun of Ifoma, calling her a mummy Geo while other members of the bus prayed. Ebuka blocked his ears with earpiece while listening to some hit singles from DeVito and Burna Boy. As the bus made its way through the forest, the sky grew darker. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and a heavy rain began to fall. The driver, an elderly man with years of experience on the treacherous roads, gripped the wheel tightly. He drove speedy and carefully, trying to pedal through the rough and dusty road. This rain came out of nowhere, he muttered. It's not natural. Suddenly, a massive snake appeared in the middle of the road. It was larger than any snake they had ever seen, its eyes glowing with an unearthly light. The driver swerved to avoid it, but the bus skidded on the wet road, tumbling into a ravine. The impact was catastrophic. Screams filled the air, then faded into silence. Some of the corps members were unconscious, and some of them were laying dead on the ground. Villagers gathered trying to help some of them. Efema and Chidi died right on the spot. Ebuka became helpless and confused, watching his two closest friends laying dead right next to him. He sat right there next to Ebuka and Efema as they laid lifeless on the floor. After consoling himself, he was still stubborn and adamant. He took his bag and continued. His journey, after walking for an hour plus, he found a bus stop where he joined another batch of NYSC members traveling. He joined them and boarded the bus. This time, the journey began smoothly, and he thought to himself, after all, the previous bus was bad. It had some mechanical issues. I don't think there is anything spiritual about any of this, he said to himself. Barely 1 hour into the journey, the clouds became darker and a heavy rain began to fall. It rained heavily that the driver began to panic on the road. Suddenly, the driver, a middle-aged man, got scared because everything became unnatural. As he sped down the road, he applied the brakes on the car, but they did not work. He tried using the handbrakes, but yet it did not work. At this time, the passengers had noticed the driver's challenge on getting the bus to stop. Now, they began shouting. The screams grew louder as the bus swerved left and right, and boom, there was a grave silence with a huge smoke coming out from the bus, blood gushing out from the bus as the corpses had been badly injured. Some died on the spot. Other motorists pulled over and tried to help. The ambulance quickly arrived and they passengers were all whisked away. Ebuka was badly wounded and unconscious. His eyes were pale and his face covered in blood. Ebuka woke up in a hospital bed, his body battered and broken. He was the only survivor. The villagers who visited him refused to meet his eyes, whispering among themselves that he was cursed. At night, he was haunted by visions of the Ekene. The snake appeared in his dreams, its eyes burning with vengeance and chasing after him furiously and calling his name. The next morning, Ebuka's parents came to pick him from the hospital on hearing the bad news of the accident. They arrived at the dusty village hospital and were ushered in by the nurses who were attending to him. Ebuka, on seeing his parents, became happy and felt a little bit of relief. They got home safely that evening. Ebuka's sister rushed and hugged him. "Brother Ebuka, welcome," she said, as she collected his bag from him, taking it upstairs happily. Ebuka settled in his room, reflecting about everything that has happened. Deep down, he knew what happened was because of the snake he had killed in the village. He could not believe his friends were dead. Tears dropped down his cheeks as he thought about them. A loud voice called out to him from downstairs. "Sir," it was his mom calling him to come down for dinner. His mom made him some vegetable soup. As they sat in the dining room eating together, Ebuka's younger sister Isoma was a 12-year-old secondarian. She was very intelligent and had a bright future ahead of her. They all enjoyed their meal that evening like one happy family. And they all went to bed after that. The next morning, Ebuka woke up and was scrolling on his phone when he heard a loud scream from the next room. It was his mom. He quickly rushed there, only to find his younger sister laying lifelessly on the bed. As his mom and dad tried to wake her, they immediately rushed her to the hospital, but it was too late. The doctors and nurses confirmed she was already dead and there was nothing they could do. It was a day of sorrow in the house. Ebuka could not believe what was happening. He knew he was the cause of what has happened. Unable to bear the guilt and the nightmares, Ebuka returned to Umwagu to seek forgiveness. The villagers demanded he perform a cleansing ritual, but even that did not ease his torment. The curse had taken root and the spirits would not rest. Ebuka became helpless and was determined to carry out the 3 sacrifices. The next morning, Ebuka walked down the village early in the morning, naked. He did the ritual for 7 days. After that, he carried out a massive burial ceremony for the NYSC. Every villager was in attendance of the party. The village chief priest carried a cleansing ritual on him the next day to set him free from all the curses he had incurred on himself. On one stormy night, Ebuka disappeared. The villagers claimed they saw him walking into the forest, calling out to the NYSC. When they searched for him the next morning, they found no trace of him, only a large snake coiled near the spot where the sacred snake had been killed. It slithered away silently, leaving the villagers to wonder if Ebuka had become one with the spirit he had defied. And the story did not end there. Days later, strange occurrences began to ripple through the village once more. Villagers reported hearing Ebuka's voice in the dead of night, echoing through the forest with anguished cries. Hunters claimed to see a shadowy figure wandering between the trees. its form neither human nor entirely snake. The elders gathered and performed another round of cleansing rituals, but the disturbances persisted. Then came the dreams. Several villagers, including the Igwe, dreamt of Ebuka standing at the edge of the forest, his eyes hollow and his body entwined with snakes. In the dreams, he spoke in a voice that was not his own. "You took me, but you did not free me." The Igwe called for a diviner from a neighboring village. The diviner, an elderly woman with piercing eyes, arrived with her apprentice and spent 3 days in the forest. When she emerged, her face was pale, her expression grim. "The spirit of the Ekanisi has claimed him," she announced, "but his soul is trapped between worlds. Until the proper atonement is made, neither he nor the village will know peace." The villagers were horrified. "What must we do?" the Igwe asked. The diviner instructed them to prepare a grand sacrificial feast to honor Allah, the earth goddess, and the Ekensi. Every household was to contribute, and the ritual would culminate with the offering of a pure white ram at the site of the snake's death. The villagers worked tirelessly, their fear driving them to ensure every detail was perfect. On the night of the ritual, the entire village gathered in the forest. The air was thick with tension as the diviner chanted incantations, her voice rising and falling like the wind. When the ram was finally sacrificed, a deafening roar shook the ground. The villagers fell to their knees as a massive glowing snake appeared, its body shimmering with an otherworldly light. Behind it stood a shadowy figure that resembled Ebuka, his face serene but distant. Diviner bowed low. "Spirits of the land, we beg for your mercy." The snake's eyes seemed to bore into the crowd before it turned and disappeared into the forest, taking the shadowy figure with it. The ground where it had lain glowed faintly before returning to darkness. From that day forward, the disturbances ceased. The villagers spoke in hushed tones of the night the spirits were appeased, and the story of Ebuka became a cautionary tale passed down through generations. In the heart of the forest, the Ekenisi continued its silent watch, a reminder of the delicate balance between humanity and the divine. From that day, the NYSC members who came to Umwagu listened carefully to the Igwe's warnings. The story of Ebuka and the sacred snake became a cautionary tale, a reminder that some traditions are not to be trifled with. And in the heart of the forest, the Ekensi continued its silent watch, a guardian of the land and a harbinger of consequences for those who dare to disrespect the sacred Ekensi. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment to tell us what you think about the adventures of Ebuka.